There's this idea in science, and I do believe in it, of um, validating and looking for reliable data and replicating results and sort of making things as solid as possible. But often, in my experience, data itself is so messy that even if you were to replicate and try to replicate some of these results, it may not necessarily mean that anything is invalid. So, I was working with data today, and this data that I've been working with for a very long time. And I had some results that I was trying to replicate. And what was interesting, and I was just trying to replicate observations. So this is a sort of general trick, is to replicate observations in data sets. And what was interesting is I could not figure out how to replicate something that I did. Um, and it was should be fairly easy in terms of how to actually replicate it. And I did this, and I'm honest. Um, this is something that I had replicated several times at different sort of stages, that sort of looking at the observations, and I can't figure out how to do it today. And I think I've been thinking about what happened. I think what happened is that I have a series of data sets that are all linked together. And I think one of these has been updated. Um, and so it throws off the number of observations. Now, I don't exactly know. I have to explore this, but I think that's what happened. Um, so my point is that in a world, if we presume that the world is static, if we presume that the world never changes, um, then validating and having a valid result, or having a valid and reliable result of something, some particular universe. Um, if that's the scenario, then validating and in finding reliable results um, is plausible, right? If there's a fixed universe, then multiple people can look at it and replicate it. But in a world where there isn't a fixed universe, where things are constantly updating, where data is entirely messy and it doesn't look perfect, um, we might not ever expect that. And we shouldn't expect that. In my experience, I'm going to give you um, what happens often is that data gets updated, different data sources, the sort of how it gets measured, for example, in public data sets might change. And then we have to figure out how to deal with this. And this is a very normal process of data in itself. And I think we make these assumptions that the data is perfect, the data is always up to date, the data is sort of consistent. But if you look at real world instances, you'll notice that that is far from the case. Real world stuff is very messy. And I think we need to be much more forgiving. I am much more of I'm of the opinion now that I think we should remove some of the standards that we have to allow for more flexibility. And what do I mean by that? It's to allow, there is this sort of belief that there is a better result, or a result that is perfect. And I think what we need to do is relax that belief that there is a perfect data, perfect results. And I think we need to encourage people to not have perfectness and be very imperfect with what they actually show, and show all of the warts and what it actually looks like. The problem is, if you do that today, you'll never get published, um, because it's not what the market expects. If you were to show, that you did everything well and sort of consistent, and then you showed insignificant results, you would never get published. Um, if you showed a flaw in your data, it would never get published. Um, there's just a number of different things that will prevent people from doing good science. And what we need to do is relax some of these assumptions and allow people to, um, present what they have, and just that's it. Just present what they have. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about. What I'm presuming, or what I'm proposing, is much more closer to, I think, the original intent, um, of just presenting things regardless of whether they make sense or whether they look perfect in any sort of way, and just say this is the results. Um, I think we need to get closer to that than the way that we have things right now, where we're always looking for perfectness. Um, and honestly, I think the only way that we could do that is to have a much more open system, in the sense of not open of the data, but open in the scientific process, where, um, both reviewers and editors get to actually look at real world data, look at the data, um, you know, in real time, where somebody's actually trying to solve this particular thing. That there is an honest effort to disclose some of these things, in the sense of how results were found, not necessarily that there's actually significant results, but that how results were actually found. Because ultimately, all the results require digging. They all require analysis. They require in-depth, exploration. It would be foolish to assume that that doesn't happen. So we just need to be honest with that, in the sense of just revealing all of those little things, and how we actually get there, and the warts that we actually have. So I think the honesty is, when you look at real world data, you will actually, uh, do something. You'll look at a result, um, and then you'll find it's not as expected, and then you have to dig in and sort of figure out why it wasn't expected. And that happens all the time. There's all these sort of micro moments where that happens. And I think we just need to be open with those things, and know that there is all of this digging that goes on. I wish that there was an alternative way. I just don't know what that alternative way is, in terms of this digging that you have to do, in terms of looking at data and seeing what is going on. Why isn't that working? What is the result? And there's all these little steps. It's more akin to programming, where you're debugging. Say you have a program that's supposed to run. You have this sort of hypothesis of how this program is supposed to run. And when you run it, it doesn't work. And then your job is to debug how this thing, should work. And eventually it does get to the point where it actually does function and it does work. But all of those little tiny steps, one could say that that is p hacking and all of that kind of stuff, but that is the steps of how it takes to actually create a software program. I think what we just need to do is just be more honest with it. Um, and if things are messy, then we just present the messiness of it. And on the other side, it's not necessarily the onus on the scientist and the researcher, but it's on the other side to allow messiness to exist and say, oh, okay, that makes sense to me, and why that doesn't work the way that we thought it was going to work, and then move on. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.